The NFL draft is an interesting place where we see teams take chances on guys that are seen as projects or guys who put up that production at the college level and are seen as slam dunk picks by the national media. But today I'm going to try to figure out, is a project quarterback or a production quarterback better, and why? In order to understand this better, I'm going to give you my definition of project and production as far as quarterbacks go in the NFL. I think a project quarterback can fall under two different definitions. The first one being a guy who has all the talent and all the skills in the world that you could possibly want in your quarterback, but didn't have that production at the college level, or maybe didn't get to play as much as you would like for a guy to be your first round pick. And I think the second definition is kind of similar, but it goes into the realm of Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, where you pick a guy who you think isn't fully ready yet, but you want them to sit behind somebody, a veteran quarterback in your organization, to hold their hand and guide them to becoming the best quarterback they can be before they even step on the field for the first time. And now a production quarterback I think should be pretty obvious, but it's a guy who put up the production at the college level, won the Heisman, won the national championship, led the nation in passing yards or touchdown passes, or even rushing yards, like an elite guy like Jaden Daniels, like that. Someone who was able to do it with his arm and his legs and win the Heisman that way. But that's what I mean by production quarterback. Now let's hop into some examples of project and production quarterbacks, starting with the project side of things. I think the most prevalent example of this in recent memory is Josh Allen, a guy who came out of Wyoming, definitely a lower school, nationally recognized, someone who had accuracy concerns but had all the arm strength and athleticism you could possibly want in a quarterback. And the Bills took a chance on him, taking him 7th overall in the 2018 draft. Josh Allen, in 3 years at Wyoming, played in 27 games, and he only played in 11 games his third year, which still is a pretty decent amount for having a 12-game season, where that year he finished with 1,800 passing yards and 16 touchdowns as well. But definitely his most impressive year was his sophomore year with Wyoming, where he had 3,200 passing yards with 28 touchdown passes, but he also had 15 interceptions as well. So the turnovers were definitely a concern with Josh Allen, but not bad production, right? So you could definitely argue that the production was there in college, but at the same time was still definitely considered a raw product. And you could see that with Bills fans' reactions from the NFL draft that year.
The Buffalo Bills select Josh Allen.
Now, 27 games is about the middle mark of the quarterbacks I'm going to talk about this year between project and production, because I think project goes into guys who didn't have that college experience as well, played less games, which is definitely a more recent phenomenon, I would say. The next guy that falls under project quarterbacks is Trey Lance. And kind of the whole reason I wanted to make this video in the first place, right? Because he just played in the Hall of Fame game, played pretty well, I would say, but was taken very high in the first round, kind of out of nowhere. Someone we didn't really know much about, and only played 19 games in his college career. I think he had the least amount of games played by a starting NFL quarterback maybe ever before playing in the NFL. Over his 3 years in college, he had less than 3,000 passing yards total, his best year coming in his sophomore year with 2,700 yards passing and 28 touchdown passes. To go along with that, he also had 14 rushing touchdowns that year. So very impressive touchdown numbers from Trey Lance that year. Maybe not the yard production you're looking for, but 1,100 rushing yards is definitely nothing to sneeze at. So it's clear from these numbers that the talent level was clearly there, but also at a very lower level at NDSU that year as well. So definitely concerned that the production wouldn't translate to the NFL, but still good enough to want to take a chance on him. But only 19 games played in your college career definitely isn't much to go from. And I think the 49ers knew that they had a challenge at their hands that might be too much to overcome. Now, he's definitely an example so far that would fall under the failed project quarterback realm, but someone who is definitely a clear example of a project quarterback. And the last guy I want to talk about for project quarterbacks is Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts, a guy who had 24 games played in college. Again, a little bit on the lower mark of the project quarterbacks guy, but during his 3 years at Florida, he had 3,100 passing yards, again, a little bit low compared to the other guys that we're going to see. He had 2,500 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions in his junior year at Florida. His completion percentage in college was only 53%, so a very low mark there, especially for the college level. But someone who ran the fastest 40 time of any quarterback in combine history, a guy who has really top 1 arm strength and all the tools in the world, but might arguably be the rawest product of any of the guys we're going to talk about today, and someone who is going into his third year in the NFL with still some pretty high hopes, but definitely seen as a bust so far in the NFL by the vast majority of people who watch the sport. So of the 3 examples so far, only one has really turned out to prove himself and prove the team who took a chance on him right in Josh Allen. Now, the first quarterback I want to talk about under the production side of this discussion is Patrick Mahomes. A guy who you could argue fits both molds, but based on the stats I'm about to show you, really should have been seen as a production guy without a doubt. Patrick Mahomes played 32 games at Texas Tech where he had over 11,000 passing yards and 93 touchdown passes, with also 29 interceptions, but still a very good interception to touchdown ratio, and had arguably one of the more productive college careers of any quarterback in college history, but wasn't seen as such. He was seen as a wild gunslinger who really took too many chances and ultimately had to sit behind Alex Smith his first year before he came onto the scene, and we all know what happened after that. Now, Mahomes is definitely a successful example of someone who's won 3 Super Bowls and been to 5 total, and I think all the signs were there for him, which is why I put him in the production category. But it's also interesting because I think the argument at the time was that he was a project quarterback, so I think he's actually kind of the perfect guy for this whole video as it is. But I mean, looking back at it now, you look at these numbers in college and you go, how are more teams not sold on Mahomes in the first place? The next guy who falls under the production quarterback category is Bryce Young, someone who played 3 years at Alabama, won the national championship his first year, won the Heisman his second year, had over 8,000 passing yards in his career, 4,800 in his best with 47 touchdown passes, 80 touchdowns total, and only 12 interceptions in his career. I think this guy is definitely one of the peak players as far as production players go in all of college football. And it's pretty obvious why he went number 1 overall. The height concerns and weight concerns were definitely there for Bryce Young being taken at 1. But it's hard to argue that he shouldn't have been taken number 1 overall after what he did in college. Now, Bryce Young is another guy who's going into his 3rd year, who hasn't really had the production at the NFL level, but is considered a production guy at the college level. And last year kind of turned it on near the end of the season. And we'll see if he can continue and grow from where we saw him last year, but definitely not someone you can put under a success for production quarterbacks in the NFL, but a guy I think you can't skip on when it comes to talking about production quarterbacks. And the last guy for production quarterbacks I want to talk about is Baker Mayfield. A guy, when you look at these stats on your screen, played 4 years in college, his first year at Texas Tech and then 3 years at Oklahoma, won a Heisman in his 4th year, had over 1,400 passing yards, 131 touchdowns, and only 30 interceptions. An insane touchdown interception rate at the college level, and someone who had all the production in the world, and it's clear why he went number 1 overall. Again, another guy who I think you can kind of put in that Bryce Young category. Someone who really didn't prove themselves, but as their career has gone on, has really kind of proven themselves in the league. I think is a top 15 quarterback right now. And I think you could put him under the success category for sure as far as production quarterbacks go. But I think the hope with him was that he would be a top 5 level guy. Someone who could bring you to the Super Bowl. Has been to 3 playoffs in his NFL career and has led one of the more efficient offenses over the past 2 years with the Buccaneers. And he's the final guy I'm going to talk about in this video between production and project quarterbacks. I think overall what we've really learned in this video, it's a higher percent shot if you take a chance on a production quarterback compared to a project quarterback. But what we've also learned is that if a project quarterback works out, it could be a very high success. But at the same time, Mahomes, depending on what category you want him to fall under, has proven to be the best quarterback in the NFL for 8 straight years now and can really make the case for either side of what you want to do as an NFL organization in the draft, who you want to take a chance on, and why. Now, nobody really knows what's going to happen in the NFL draft. That's why it's a gamble every year. Projections and talent are definitely big reasons on why you take a guy so high in the draft. And Jalen Milroe, I think, is going to be the next guy we see under the project quarterback rankings. The guy who was taken in a later round, but definitely I would say falls under the project quarterback since he didn't have really the production most teams were hoping for his last year at Alabama. And someone who was seen to probably be the number 1 quarterback taken this year if he had had a better year at Alabama. But someone who I think has all the tools to be a great quarterback in the NFL, and we could see really come onto the scene and play very well. But until we see him play, we really won't know if he was a success or fail for the project quarterback side of things. But in conclusion, I think production quarterbacks make the most sense to take, and I think we see them taken more often higher in the draft year to year.